of a marriage to the U.S. mail. Amazing. But what's even more amazing is the many other ways that you can use the post office in a vengeful manner. And to give us a few examples is Detective J.M. Detective, could you give us some examples of revenge by mail?
Revenge by mail is only limited by the person's imagination. For the most part, the examples I'm about to give are ones I've learned while on the job, although I must admit a couple of them are my own creations. But let's get to it. One of my favorite pranks is very simple, but very effective. It can be a real pain in the butt. What you do is go down to your local post office, get a change of address form, fill in the victim's name and address, and the new address. It can be anywhere your heart desires, from around the block to around the world. And if he also receives gifts or valuable items in the mail, I suggest making the local Salvation Army as the new address, or any other place which might benefit from such items. Another way to create havoc and also make your victims shell out money is to look through magazines and catalogs. There are a lot of expensive items in there that can be bought now and paid for later. So order as many expensive items as you can and mail it to your victim's address. Another thing to do is to join these Book of the Month clubs, Record of the Month clubs, or whatever of the month clubs. Ever try to get off one of those lists? Can you imagine being in 10 of those lists?
I'd like to play a little game with you, if that's all right. I'll give you a situation, and then I'd like you to respond with a method of mail revenge that you would recommend.
Okay, shoot.
Let's say the Mark is a family man. You know, a wife, 2 kids, a dog. What can you do to disrupt the entire family as opposed to just the Mark?
Put them on offensive mailing lists. Pornographic mailing lists such as pornographic magazines, pornographic merchandise. Put them on the Communist Party's mailing list. There are hundreds of mailing lists you can put them on. What husband wants his kids looking at this stuff? And, for that matter, what husband wants his wife thinking that he subscribes to these lists? Another thing you can do is send your Mark's wife a pretty box of chocolates. And a note saying how much he loves her and all like that. It's one of my favorites. I'm
confused. How can sending a box of chocolates and a nice note to the Mark's wife get him in trouble?
Did I forget to mention mixing chocolate laxatives in with the candy?
I guess you did. Well, that ought to flesh out the situation. Okay. How about if your Mark is a businessman?
Send the sexually perverted magazines right to his office. Can you imagine the looks he'll get when he gets his stuff right on the job? These bizarre toys and sexually perverted magazines? Should be quite a thrill. By the way, there are dozens upon dozens of homosexual and bisexual magazines available today. I found if you mail these to the Mark's place of work, you can start rumors or quickly get him fired. And if you can get a photo of the Mark, it's even better. Send that to a gay magazine along with the requisite money and place an ad for a gay lover. Then when the copy comes out with his picture and the ad in it, send that to his boss, his wife, or his girlfriend.
Fascinating. Well, how about if you have a bone to pick with your neighbor?
Try this. Get some printed invitations made up, announcing a Sunday afternoon brunch to your neighbors, announcing the date, the time, the directions, the whole enchilada. The fancier the invitation, the better. Mail it to his people at work, all the neighbors. Then sit back and watch the hassles begin.
Not that I want to know, but how can you ruin someone's marriage or love relationship?
Here's what I learned years ago. If the Mark is a man, just type a letter up saying, "Dear Deborah, my name is," and put the Mark's name there. "I saw your ad in Swingers Bazaar this last week, and I'm hot to trot. I'm anxious to get it on. But you can't reach me by phone because I'm married. But you can reach me at the address on the envelope, but mark it personal so my wife doesn't see it. Put that letter in an envelope marked Deborah Lawson, care of Bazaar Swingers ad, box 1268A, Charleville, Arizona." Of course, there is no such address, so the post office will return to the Mark's home. And sooner or later, the Mark's girlfriend or wife is bound to discover it. And then the fireworks begin.
What else can you send in the mail that will irritate your victim?
Things that smell. I mean, things that really stink. I mean, animal droppings, human droppings, overripened fruit and vegetables, fish. Imagine what a week-old fish smells like. It smells like Boston in the summertime.
Well, Detective, thank you very much for your suggestions.
Now, you're welcome. Oh, by the way, when do I get paid for this?
Oh, don't worry. The check's in the mail. Now let's rejoin investigator Quinn Vickers, who has a visitor with an interesting story that many of us can relate to.
You know, it's a common fact of life that there are those people out there, a small number, but nonetheless they're out there, those who feel that they have to stress their superiority over others. Some do it at their work with fellow workers, some do it at sports, on the athletic fields, some do it in their love life. Yet there are just a few who feel a great need to stress their superiority over decent, honest, basic human beings, such as my client, Mr. Harold Jerriman over here. Harold, why don't you pick it up from here?
Well, the incident took place on Thursday afternoon during my lunch break. I was eating at the little diner across the street from the library where I work. Everything was perfectly normal. It was then that I first noticed him. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him, being more interested in my meal. However, it soon became evident that he was a troublemaker.
Hey, I see a good place to sit. Come on. Yo, buddy, mind if we eat here?
Well, actually, yes, but there are other tables available.
I know that, Wimp, but I want to eat at this one because I want to watch my truck, you understand?
If you give me a moment, I'm just about finished.
Oh, just about finished, huh? Well, I can't wait. Besides, it looks to me like your order's to go.
I was terrified. I had no choice but to leave. As I was leaving, I noticed the man's license plate number and made a mental note of it. I was so humiliated. This kind of thing happened to me many times in the past, and I wanted to get even with that man. I looked upon him as being all the people who have hurt me rolled into one, and that's when I contacted Mr. Vickers.
Well, when Harold first came to me, he didn't know what to do. All he had was the punk's license number, but that was enough for me. I went down to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I filled out a form stating that, I had a small accident with this guy, and I was just checking to verify his address. Within a couple of days, I had the punk's address. Now, Harold here was adamant about getting even with him himself, so we laid out a battle plan. Harold, you take over, buddy.
With pleasure. Once I had the man's name and address, I decided to start off with what the man apparently wanted: food. So from a payphone across the street from the man's apartment, I called about 15 takeout restaurants and had them send him all types of food. And I had them spaced out so that they would arrive about every 15 minutes. Let me back up a moment to tell you that there had been a series of robberies at a local convenience store chain. Now, with that in mind, I planted a toy handgun under the truck's seat, and I threw in a city map with the locations of the convenience store circled in red and a few newspaper clippings about the robberies. Then I went to a telephone and phoned the police and stated anonymously that I had seen where the robber lived and that I had seen his gun in his truck. To make a long story short, the police arrived just as the man was getting into his truck. When the police saw the gun, the map, and the newspaper clippings, well, let's just say that the man had a lot of explaining to do down at the station.
How do you feel now?
Confident. Of course I don't go causing trouble for other people, but at least I know I have the confidence in myself to know I can get even with anyone.
Confidence, a quality we all desire, yet surprisingly few of us possess. However, most of us do possess one of these, a telephone. And it so happens that this is the revenge seeker's greatest ally. And here to enlighten us on this subject is Officer P.F., whose looks we have electronically altered to protect his identity.
I'm going to be demonstrating several methods of phone reprisal using my own personal phone. Now, some of the techniques that I'm going to talk about can be done in your home, but some of them are going to require the use of a payphone, and I'll explain that as we go along. Now, first of all, if the prank you're going to pull requires you to talk to the mark yourself on the phone and the mark recognizes your voice, then I suggest that you use a handkerchief placed over the mouthpiece of the phone. Now, I know that you've seen this in millions of movies and TV shows, but the fact remains that it works. Now, before we get even with that certain low life in your life, let me just ask you a little question. What is the most valuable possession that a human being has? You give up? The answer is time. Time is precious.